Vicki, we see presidential frontrunners from both parties standing in solidarity with union workers. Explain why this is an important move by the president in winning over voters.
Look, auto workers are on strike to earn a fair wage, to be able to support their families, to have a better life. This is so fundamental. Biden is showing what he stands for. He's deeply pro-worker, and it's really refreshing to see him meeting people where they're at, going to the states where there's so much happening. At Ford Majority, we care about this a great deal. Our work helps Democrats win power in state legislatures, inspired by these very same values and in pursuit of policies that can improve people's day-to-day lives. So I, for one, am heartened that Biden is taking a stand on the issue.
Yeah, in modern politics, of course, there's quite a difference in how Democrats have approached unions and how Republicans have. And Senator Tim Scott, Tim Scott is one presidential candidate who has actually criticized the auto workers strike. In fact, today he doubled down on comments he made saying workers who strike should be fired. Let's take a listen.
The contracts that they're signing for a 4-day work week with more pay, more benefits, but fewer hours is one that doesn't work today. It certainly will not work in the future. But instead of having a president on the picket line, we need this president on the border, the southern border, helping us close the southern border.
Tim Scott's poll numbers are already low. David, you think that this could do him in further?
Well, look, in a hard-right Republican primary where the national right to work has greater influence than unions, I don't know that it hurts him. But what it suggests is he's not a general election candidate, and he's out of touch with where most of the nation is right now. And I think, look, what we're seeing Joe Biden do and what we're seeing Tim Scott say is a perfect example of how elections ultimately get decided, which is a contrast. And so the two kind of narratives in Joe Biden's approach to this are, one, to draw a contrast between his pro-worker, pro-labor bona fides that is in his ethos with Republicans who typically would stand in the way of labor advancing. And then secondly, the economy will be the wild card going into 24. It's a strong economy, but people still doubt it. There are spots of weakness. And so Joe Biden knows that. And he is demonstrating to the American people that he is fighting to raise wages for working Americans in a time where there certainly is some economic uncertainty.
And Vicki, to David's point about the challenges that President Biden has in front of him, he also has to worry about making himself more appealing to voters, despite being the likely Democratic nominee. In fact, a new NBC News poll out today has his disapproval rating at 56%, which is an all-time high for him. Where's the disconnect here between Biden and voters?
We are going to be drowning in polls between now and November. And I don't know about everyone at home, but to me, it feels like we've been stuck in a vicious cycle where every single election is an existential crisis for America. And the only way that we break this cycle is to do what Republicans have been doing for so long, think strategically about power in our democracy. Obviously, there's huge power in the White House, but there's also outsized power in state legislatures, and Democrats ignore it at their peril. I know I keep coming back to state legislatures, and it's because they're so incredibly important in our democracy, even as we all obsess about the White House. So for everyone watching, there are more than 7,000 state legislative seats across the country. And to ensure that we're electing the best people, we need to educate ourselves. So I hope we all keep watching the polls, but for each of you watching right now, go find out who your state legislator is, pay attention to what they're voting for, get involved in a competitive race. This is truly the beating heart of our democracy.
And David, President Biden, of course, has several major accomplishments on issues that people, young people especially, care about. And I say young people because in the polling so far for the last year or so, that's a particular sore spot. We talk about legislation to combat climate change, expand health care access, improve transportation, reduce gun violence. Why aren't any of these things translating to stronger support and excitement for young voters?
Look, I think part of it is where we are in the election calendar, and secondly, how the questions are asked, right? If you ask a question about Joe Biden's performance on issues, Sure, he's doing well, but is it going to be imperfect in a yes or no question? Of course it is. The student loan debt and the investments in the economy are there and they're working, but is it everything that everybody wanted? No, of course not. But move us into next year. Move us into an approaching election where the contrast is with Donald Trump. And then voters' views become very crystallized, and they see a president who has been investing in an economy for all people, restoring American pride, if you will, on the world stage, restoring stability, restoring sobriety to governing. Contrast that with Donald Trump, who is under indictment and is willing to shred the Constitution to serve himself above all others. When voters see that contrast, whether they're young voters or old voters, that question gets answered very differently. They may still see an imperfect record of both candidates, but the contrast question comes into clear view.